Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Comeback Sports Podcast. I'm your host, AJ. We got a jam-packed filled episode as usual. Joining me today will be a returning guest, Brian, and we'll be discussing college football and some NFL football. So stick around. Now for your quote of the week. I'm in favor of execution. Maybe our entire team needs to be executed after tonight.
Brian Kelly, what was he thinking after saying that?
That's what your thoughts are on this quote?
That's exactly what my thoughts are on this quote. And I understand, that's not exactly mean it literally, but in this day and age, you kind of got to, you got to watch what you're saying, on the sidelines. Things that get picked up, social media turns them into what they want to believe that they mean, and then you get canceled or you get in trouble for saying them, even if the context wasn't there. I feel like Brian Kelly just needed to be a little bit more conscious of what he was saying after that game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he was kind of overfilled with emotion in terms of how close he was to losing a very winnable game. No, I'm not going to knock Florida State. They played really well, especially the return of McKenzie Milton. But you're right. You got to be careful what you say because social media spreads it like wildfire.
Yeah.
But to his defense, yeah, he just wanted to have a winnable game that wasn't so close.
Yeah, they looked good at times, but their defense let Florida State back in the game in that third and fourth quarter. Shout out McKenzie Milton. It's like Alex Smith a couple years ago. It doesn't really matter what he does or how good he is. It's comeback player of the year type vibe around him just for the simple fact that he made it back to see the field again. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody assumed he would. I honestly don't think anybody assumed he would play football, let alone walk normally ever again after his injury at Central Florida back in, 2018?
Did you see the video?
Oh, it's disgusting.
It is gross.
It's really gross. His leg literally almost came off. His leg almost came off. So, yeah, props to McKenzie Milton. Great game. Florida State stuck around. Obviously didn't turn out the way they might have wanted, but Brian Kelly, you got to be a little bit smarter. Yeah. What you're saying after the game.
Yeah, hopefully he addressed it in the post interview he has. But yeah, watch what you say, Brian Kelly. Brian, it's good to have Brian Lindino. It's good to have you back.
A lot of Brians right now.
A lot of Brian's going on in the first couple minutes of the show. Brian, it's good to have you back. Just kind of run through a little bit. We'll be talking about the Georgia-Clemson game.
Yep.
Week 2 predictions for some big key matchups like Iowa at Iowa State, Oregon at Ohio State, our Heisman favorites. And then I'll championship predictions, and then I'll transition over to NFL after that. But first off, what have you been up to, man? It's been a while.
It has been a while. Thanks for having me back. Enjoyed the last time we were out here. That was more college basketball related, if I remember. It was the spring, right around the tournament.
Yeah, right before the tournament.
Right before the tournament. I want to apologize to the fans. I gave out Texas as my dark horse championship team, and they got bounced in the first round. So apologies for that. Hopefully my predictions will be a little bit better this time. But other than that, just been hanging out, working Urban Matter, doing my job. Hasn't been too crazy, man. It's been work. It's been wake up, work, go to sleep, watch sports.
That sounds
like life, right?
That just sounds like life. When you're in your mid 20s or early 30s, you just enjoy the free time you have until you have to grow up.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure my predictions went very well. Didn't go too well either because I had Texas as a dark horse as well, and they didn't go too far. But I did have one thing right. I did have Houston going to the Final Four?
I think you had Houston making a little run to the Final Four, if I remember correctly. I wasn't as high on them. I thought they were going to get bounced. I didn't think they were ready, but their defense ended up being too much for a lot of really good teams. And you know what? They battled it out, made the Final Four. I did have Gonzaga in my championship.
Me too.
That almost felt too easy. But man, it was a good March Madness. I'm glad we were able to actually have one.
True.
I'm hoping this college football season follows suit.
Yeah, it's already looking like that. I was just at the Wisconsin versus Penn State game in Madison. It was so refreshing to see fans in stands. I just remember a year ago, there were no fans, and this was for college and NFL around the same time. And just the atmosphere of just college football being back, it was great.
For you, was it one of those moments, even though Wisconsin is your team and they lost, was it the sheer fact that you were watching a football game live in a stadium full of fans that it doesn't ever make the loss okay, but it at least makes you feel a little bit better after about, that's what like my Saturdays ideally should be like, is being able to watch live sports with fans in the stands.
Yeah.
I got to feel like that's what it's like. I mean, even for like, I was at the Cubs game on Monday and they won, so that's cool, but they're terrible. Like they purposefully tanking after the All-Star break, but just being in the stands at Wrigley Field with like a packed house, good team or bad team, still feels good.
It does.
So
It sure does. Speaking of a packed house, Georgia went against Clemson on Saturday, that same night of the Wisconsin game. Kind of, what are your thoughts on that game? It was a big marquee matchup. I think it was number 5 against number 2 or
3 against 5.
3 against 5.
It was 3 against 5. Clemson being the 3, Georgia being the 5. I'll be honest, I flipped between that game and the UCLA game, mainly because I started out watching the Clemson-Georgia game. That was what I kind of was had circled all week leading up. But the first half was so bad. It was just so sloppy. There was multiple turnovers. Offensive lines couldn't block anybody. It's not like it was a tough defensive battle. There was great defensive plays. There was a lot of sloppy offense. And it kind of made it a little bit boring to watch, even though you were watching Clemson versus Georgia. I expected a little bit more than, 13-0 by the end of it. But there's 2 takeaways that I really kind of had from that game. It's Georgia's the real deal. Mainly the fact that their defense is full of just speedsters, guys that just fly to the football. Clemson had absolutely nowhere to go on the ground. DJ Ugalele, if that's how I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Clemson's quarterback, as soon as he snapped the ball, there was pressure on him. He couldn't scramble. He was throwing the ball into empty spaces because wide receivers weren't getting open fast enough, which is difficult when you have no time to throw. It was a clinic on defense by Georgia for much of the game because of how fast they are, the speed. But then for me, JT Daniels, their quarterback, while it wasn't a great game for him, I think Georgia's the team to beat in the SEC East, and I think could give Alabama a tight game in an SEC championship with a guy like JT Daniels and his experience at the quarterback position.
Yeah, JT Daniels transferred from USC, and I knew he was going to be someone to watch. I wasn't expecting to be a Heisman watch, and watching him play, majority of his passes were less than 10 yards, which is very difficult against a Clemson defense that's notoriously dominant every year. But he kept the chains moving, and that's what kind of led them to at least scoring on the field. And it was very surprising to see how well Georgia's defensive linemen were because they lost 7 of their starters this year. Yeah. But Clemson O-line was obviously struggling the worst. DJ Uiagalelei, I think he's pronounced it. He threw a pick 6 in the second half, and that's when the game started to open up.
That was the change. Yeah, that was the big change.
Right, and I've noticed that in week 1, you like Ohio State, Wisconsin, Clemson, obviously. Actually, they're all the matchups. It's always slow the first half, and then second half it starts to open up more. Defenses get a little more tired. Offenses start to kind of adjust and just kind of get out of the pre-game jitters.
Yeah,
it just depends who's prepared the most in the beginning. But you really see the teams in the last half of these week 1 matchups.
Yeah, I agree with that. And a lot of it is just college football wide. You have teams that are still shaking off game rust. As much as you practice and as much as you have training camps and stuff like that, or scrimmages and whatnot, nothing simulates a game the way that actually being in the game does. So you always take that first half with a grain of salt. I had somebody text me Saturday morning. They're like, "Do you have any plays or do you have any bets for today?" And I go, "I usually always take week 1 off because you just really never know what you're going to get. You never know what team is going to come out like they've been playing for 3 weeks now, and you never know who's going to take 2 or 3 quarters to get their sea legs underneath them. Some teams might not even show up. Clemson's a good example. I know Georgia is a good team, but Clemson just didn't really show up. And that's kind of what you get sometimes. You got a team like Bama who looked like they didn't skip a beat. You got a team like Oklahoma who needed 2 or 3 quarters to get going, and a team like Ohio State who needed 2 or 3 quarters to going, and ultimately they pulled off wins. But then you got teams like Clemson, ranked 3rd in the country, who didn't really show up. North Carolina didn't show up. So you just never know. week one of the college football season is always difficult, but I do think to a degree you do get a kind of like a deeper look into what some of these fringe teams, like we know Alabama's going to be good every single year, we know Oklahoma's going to be good every single year, but we get to see teams like Virginia Tech on a national stage come out and beat North Carolina, who is ranked top 10. And now it's like, okay, Virginia Tech might be a legitimate team this year with the way that they can run the football. So you get a look into some of these other teams. Florida State's a good example. Like, we've been waiting for Florida State. When are they going to be back? For the longest time. Yes, they lost, but they took the number 8 team in Notre Dame to overtime and looked damn good on offense while doing it. So you get a look at some teams like that, and you're like, okay, you know what? UCLA is going to be the real deal this year. We didn't necessarily know that beforehand. So I like week one for that, but then also it could be frustrating because you get high profile games that might not always be high quality football.
Yeah, high quality was not there for some of these matchups. Kind of jump back into the Georgia Clemson game, which is kind of focus on Clemson's quarterback, Ui Agalele. He didn't really impress me, and maybe it is a week one just kind of shaking rust off. Like, he has a big role to fill. He had to fill the role of Trevor Lawrence, who took over the role of Deshaun Watson, two high caliber football players who are both in NFL. One of them is, at least at the moment, but like
both were top 12 draft picks, and yeah, either way.
But yeah, like, is he looking like he could, change for the better, or is he going to be more of like a Kelly Bryant kind of situation?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to call him DJU for this matter, because I don't want to keep butchering his name. But, I mean, look back at the playoff last year when Trevor Lawrence was hurt. The kid balled out. The kid looked good. He looked the part. He's huge. He's got this massive frame. He's mobile. He's got a strong arm. Mm-hmm. There's accuracy issues. There were accuracy issues last year. But accuracy is one of those things that you can teach. Just look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen's a top 3 quarterback in the NFL right now, and the dude couldn't hit the broadside of a barn for the first 2 years of his career. Like, accuracy is teachable. It's things like the size and the speed and the game awareness that come on. You certainly can't teach speed, but you can teach game awareness and things like that. And that's where I think he struggles. I think that when the game gets too fast, he starts to materialize slower, reads and progressions. I think one thing I noticed in the third quarter specifically, when I kind of thought that maybe, halftime resets Clemson's offense, Georgia came out, kept playing fast on defense, and you could tell that DJ kept locking in onto his first read. And as a quarterback or as a coach, I mean, that's worst nightmare for your quarterback. That means your quarterback has no idea what's going on out there. He just knows that this is the first guy, and that's who I'm going to. So I'm a little concerned. I'm not concerned about Clemson as a whole. I think we can chalk that game up more to a team in Clemson who lost their starting quarterback, their starting running back, one of their major starting receivers, and 1 or 2 people on their offensive line, and they just were a bit discombobulated against a team that was really good. I do think Clemson still takes the ACC Coastal. I still think they take their division, and they're likely going to a playoff spot by the end of the season. But yeah, it certainly was ugly, and especially ugly for DJU on Saturday.
Yeah, kind of. You're right. Clemson, they always have a chance of making the playoffs. They'll probably be the 4 or maybe even the number 3 spot, depending on what happens outside of the ACC. In terms of like DJ, if he's that guy or not, I think he can be. You make a good point. He has the arm talent. He's
got all the tools.
Right. He's a number 1 recruit he's a 5-star recruit for a reason. He has the overall talent. And like just some simple things he needs to work on, just kind of pocket awareness. And he doesn't read what's the situation as well, and goes to his first person. And a little bit of the footwork kind of bothered me, and like his release is a little strange, but you're right, he can still sling it. But it reminded me of Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert wasn't a complete quarterback. and it could have been the Oregon play style just wasn't meant to make him thrive.
Yeah.
But he fixed it in the NFL, and he ended up being Rookie of the Year.
Yeah. They're very similar size-wise too. That's a pretty good comparison.
Yeah, I see the same mechanical errors, and those are fixable.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Clemson has seen the film, and they will work on that throughout the season.
Oh yeah,
it might just been an off game for him too.
It's Clemson. It's Dabo Swinney. I mean, he's arguably the second or third best coach in the entire country. It'll get figured out.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, they only dropped to 6 in the rankings. It's not like losing to Georgia killed their season. They dropped to 6 in the rankings. It's not the end of the world, but to kind of just echo with what you just said, if they're going to, turn the season around in a way that, they're Clemson again, it's going to start with DJU for sure.
Yeah. I do want to give a shout out to Zamir White, the running back for Georgia. He has some pretty good tackles and secured the win from in the final drive.
Yeah, he runs north and south, and he runs hard, which is nice. Too many guys nowadays are trying to dance towards the sideline and stuff like that. He knew, I got to pick up X amount of yards for first down, keep the clock moving, keep possession, seal this game.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to the matchup before we move forward?
Yeah, nothing else really to say about Georgia Clemson. I'm surprised we had that much to say about a game that was 13-0, but it is the primetime game. DJU, but I think Georgia's the real deal. I think that's the main takeaway I had is I think Georgia legitimately might be the second best team in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I give Kirby Smart some props. That man's always in the conversation
Absolutely.
for the playoffs.
Absolutely.
He was under Nick Saban for a while.
Yeah, he was. He was one of Saban's top coordinators during the McCarron era, I want to say, when McCarron was there.
Yeah.
So that was like early to mid 2010s, and then he's been the Georgia coach for like the last 5 or 6 years now, I want to say.
Yeah.
So
let's kind of move forward to our predictions for the upcoming matchups. I want to start with Iowa at Iowa State. Iowa State is my school. I went to college there. So let's kind of see what Brian's whole predictions are for this matchup. I'll try my best not to be too biased. But Brian, what do you see in this this matchup? It's going to be another big ranked matchup, and College Game Day is going to be there.
Game Day is going to be there. Yeah.
I remember I was at the last game day, and I actually saw the stage. It was so cool. So what are your predictions for this game? It's at Iowa State.
So when I go to look at games like this, especially ranked matchups, I look to see obviously how the two teams played coming in. Obviously, low sample size because it's week 2. But Iowa looked amazing against Indiana, and Iowa State did not look great against Northern Iowa. Now, Iowa State's notorious for starting seasons slow. They eke out wins against teams that they should beat pretty handily, and then as they get along in the season, they start beating teams that probably should beat them. They're very weird when it comes to that. They kind of are a team that plays to the level of their competition. I think a great example is how they, I think last season, beat an FCS school by like 6 points and then came out and beat Oklahoma when they were ranked number 2 in the country. Like, Iowa State tends to play to the level of their competition. I think the fact that they're at home, it's against rivals Iowa, and game days there, I think you're going to see the best of Brock Purdy and the best of Breece Hall. And I think that Iowa State ekes out a close, very grind-it-out win. I'm going 23-20, Iowa State on a late field goal.
Yeah, that was actually my prediction. It was going to be decided by a field goal. And what's very interesting with this matchup is it's called the Cy-Hawk game for a reason. Mm-hmm. It's Cyclones against Hawkeyes. It's been going on for decades. You want to say Iowa State has the advantage because of the home field aspect.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though. I've been to that game. Whether it's tailgating or the actual game itself.
It's got to be pretty equal, right?
It is pretty equal, and it almost feels like there's not even a home field advantage. Iowa, I envy Iowa because, they never make it to the Big Ten championship game every year like Ohio State does, but they always start very strong and very consistent, especially on the defensive side. And this year, it's looking like the run game is their strongest suit.
Yeah. They made Michael Penix Jr., Indiana's quarterback, who's very dynamic.
Yeah.
They made him look like a high schooler. Their defense, their cornerbacks and their safeties were everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think Brock Purdy is worlds better. I think in my opinion, he's probably the second or third best pure quarterback or NFL prospect at the quarterback position this year. I think if there's a quarterback that's going to be able to break down that defense in big situations, I think Brock Purdy's it. So,
you make a good point of Penix Jr., but we also forget that he just came out of a season-ending injury.
He did.
He probably is rusty. I will give Iowa props because locking down Ty Freifogel, that's hard to do.
That's very hard to do.
He is a great target. He's probably one of my favorite prospects going to come out on the draft when he's ready.
Mm-hmm.
But Michael Penix Jr., I don't think he just wasn't ready for the situation. And I give Kinnick Stadium kind of top 5 home places you don't want to play.
Yeah,
it's pretty tough.
It's tough, especially if you're playing in any sort of Big Ten type matchup. It's just a nightmare. So I do think Iowa looked really good. However, Iowa is also very notorious for kind of giving you fool's gold every now and then. They'll come out and they'll win.
The fake idea of college football. That's what Colin Cowherd said.
Exactly. They're like Iowa's that team where like you have this vision of them being these rough and tumble corn field level just like players, guys who are just gritty football players, and you think that they're just gonna they're gonna out tough you, and then you see that they flash like a 34-10 on a top 20 Indiana team, and then the next week this is the week where they put up 13 points because the offense literally can't go anywhere. Like, this is what Iowa does. I'm not saying it's gonna happen against Iowa State, but I would be surprised if Iowa puts up more than 20 points in this game.
Yeah, and to your point about Brock Purdy, I think Brock Purdy's a much better quarterback than Spencer Petras. And I think the star of the show is going to have to be Breece Hall.
It will, because if you're going to beat a team like Iowa, you're going to have to control the tempo of the game, mainly because Iowa can take 8 or 9 minutes off the clock with their run game. So if you can counter that and keep the ball on offense, wear down that defense, I think, like we both have said, it's going to be a field goal game, probably decided in the fourth quarter. I think whoever controls that tempo in the first 3 quarters is who ends up coming out victorious in the fourth. And I think with Breece Hall, Iowa State's going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely someone that's been on the watch, especially last year, and he really showed out. He was a Heisman. He's on the Heisman list.
Immense talent. Talent.
But we also remember Iowa State has the most returners of the two.
Yeah,
that's why they're preseason ranked in top 7 because they have the same team versus these other teams. Yeah. They had that uncertainty of new recruits or talent that just goes to the draft or graduates.
Yeah,
I had a feeling for Iowa because, sure, they had a real shitty start to their season. They lost like 2 or 3 games in a row, but then they went undefeated for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And so I knew right off the bat they were going to be good off of Indiana. I had them beating Indiana. But Iowa State, it's the same team, and under a better coach, in my opinion. Matt Campbell has turned that program from dog shit to like an actual championship team.
Yeah, Matt Campbell is next in line to get a major. If he's gotten Iowa State to a point to where if he ever wants to leave Ames, he's going to be able to pick whatever job he wants.
Oh, yeah.
There was rumors that he was going to take the Texas job
and the Michigan State job.
So yeah, Iowa State's got immense talent on the sideline, under center, and in the backfield. I think, like we said, controlling the tempo on Saturday is going to be what ultimately decides it, and I'm going to give that edge to the Cyclones.
One thing I would tell to anyone that's watching room for Iowa State like me, do not turn over the ball. One thing I've noticed is Iowa always capitalizes on turnovers.
Yep. It's because of the run game. It's because they can literally jam it down your throat. Doesn't necessarily need the big play, the higher risk big play. They're just going to move the line, and they're going to take 4 or 5 yards at a time, wear you down, punch it in the end zone. Next thing you know, you've given up a turnover, given up 6 minutes on the clock, and 7 points. It's the Iowa football way. So,
let's transition to Oregon at Ohio State. I think this is a very interesting matchup. I haven't seen this matchup in a while, and I like how it's the West Coast offense versus a spread offense like Ohio State. What are your thoughts on it?
I liked this matchup a lot more until what happened over the weekend to Oregon, losing Kayvon Thibodeau.
Yeah, that's rough.
He's going to be out for this game, likely for the season, even though it's not a terribly bad injury. He's the level of prospect that any injury right here is likely cause for shutdown as he looks towards his NFL future. And with that being said, what I saw from Ohio State in the second half of their game against Minnesota is every bit of a team ready to go back and win the Big Ten and go to the playoff. CJ Stroud Looked great once he got comfortable. They have the best wide receiver duo in the country.
I love Chris Olave.
Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. They can beat you from so many different ways. Major Teague. They're just... Ohio State, when humming, has as good of an offense as anyone in the country. Not going to say the best, but as good of an offense as anyone in the country. I don't know if Oregon's defense without Thibodeau is going to be able to put enough pressure on Stroud to where he can't just throw whatever he wants. I honestly think Ohio State wins this by 2 or 3 touchdowns. I don't think this game's going to be close.
I have to agree with you on that. Thibodeau is he's supposed to be the number 1 pick in this year's draft.
He's Myles Garrett in every which way. He's that good.
He's versatile. He's marketable. I mean, he got to deal with Nike.
Yeah,
that's as good as you're going to get if you're an Oregon player.
Oh yeah.
But missing him in that kind of game, that's going to hurt you.
It's a game-changing loss. It 100% is. And Oregon, I'm not quite sure they're great to begin with, if we're going to be honest. I think they're overranked, to be honest. So while I do think it looks cool on paper to have, the number 4 team versus the number 12 team, if I'm going off of if remembering correctly what the new rankings are after today, while that looks appetizing on paper, I think the disparity between these two teams is much farther than that.
Yeah, and you're right. It is a mismatch, regardless of what the rankings tell you about Oregon. Oregon is not as good as they were the past 2 years. Within the past 3-5 years, I would say, I think it was Justin Herbert's last season, Oregon, that was the best Oregon team. And I don't think that team could put a number on this Ohio State team. But it's just, to me, it's just the style of play, because you don't see – usually when you see Big Ten football, it's usually the same kind of play style for Big Ten.
I agree. For all you gambling people out there, I do think the over in this game is going to be fun no matter what, because while I don't think Oregon keeps this necessarily close, I think this is a 2-touchdown game when it's all said and done. 2 touchdowns to me in this game means 49-35. Yeah. It's going to be very high scoring. Neither defense is that good, but both offenses can score. I do think Ohio State finds themselves up by 3 or 4 touchdowns in the second half, takes the foot off the gas a little bit, and then Oregon scores a couple late. I think that's where you see this game go, but when it matters most, Ohio State is going to assert their dominance here, and I think you see something in the 40s from their offense, and I think you see a double-digit win pretty easily.
Do you think – we saw Ohio State have trouble stopping Minnesota's run game.
Yeah.
And you got C.J. Verdell, who's a veteran who looked really good last season. Do you see him making a dent on the defense?
I do. I do think Oregon can I mean, it's Oregon's offense. They're good for at least 170-yard touchdown, and C.J. Verdell can easily do that. The only thing I would say is that Ohio State's defense, run defense, didn't look good, but that was when they were going against Muhammad Ibrahim, who's one of the 3 best running backs in the nation.
He's great.
He's great, and it sucks that his season's over because he tore his Achilles. That's devastating. But I don't know if Minnesota's got that kind of in the trenches Big Ten offensive line. Oregon's more of they're going to pull their guards, they're going to try and get to the edges, they're going to try and hit the home run on the ground. It's a little bit different of a run style, but I don't think that doesn't necessarily make Ohio State not susceptible to giving up big plays on the run. So I think Oregon's going to need a perfect game from Verdell to keep this close, something along the lines of 7 or 8 yards per carry for a while. But I think he can make a dent, but not enough that's going to push Oregon over the top.
Yeah, and I also forget Oregon is going to Ohio State.
Yeah, they got to go to the horse. They got to go to the horseshoe.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
It's the Fox game of the week. So therefore, you got Gus Johnson on the call. Which, if you want to look into things like that, Gus Johnson games are generally close games because
Ohio State,
for some reason, that man has the ability to force tight games at the end that requires him to make insane calls, and we remember his voice because of it. If you want to get really superstitious, you can go along that route, but I'm not going to entertain that one. Then Ohio State. It's Ohio State and a lot of points for me.
Did you see the big noon game with Gus Johnson and Joe Klatt for Wisco? And they're doing the jump around, and you see Gus Johnson just vibing.
Gus Johnson's just vibing. Gus Johnson's a treasure.
I like Gus.
Yeah.
I was trying to look for them when I was up there, but I was kind of late because I drove that morning.
Uh-huh.
So by the time I got there, they're probably already in the booth. I was going to ask Joel Clapp if he wanted to collab, but I would understand if he said no.
Joel, you want to come on the pod?
But yeah, I'm a big Joel Klatt fan. I follow his podcast. Let's see. Let's go to the fun stuff. Well, personally, my favorite subject on this college football segment, the Heisman favorites.
Okay.
So this is what we'll do. I will list my top favorites, and you'll list your top favorites, and then we'll kind of see where we kind of don't agree or we do agree on. So I'll start with my list. I'll do 6 actually, because I want to do an honorable mention. I got in this order. I got Bryce Young, Zach Charbonnet from UCLA, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, CJ Schroed, and my honorable mention is Jack Conan from Notre Dame.
Yeah, we have one similar on that list. However, I didn't go as deep as you, but I do have a couple honorable mentions that I can add into this. One of which was Jack Cohen. I think he looked really good against Florida State. For me, it's Bryce Young. After 1 week, it's Bryce Young. Yeah. That kid looked unreal.
It's ridiculous.
My number 2 right now, little favorite, or at least who I think after 1 week, is Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati.
Oh, yeah.
I think that kid is a stud, and I know we like to compare mobile quarterbacks, guys who can kind of facilitate and improvise with their legs, but also have great arms. And the 2 that come to mind really are Desmond Ridder and then Spencer Rattler. I think Desmond Ridder is better than Spencer Rattler. I know that Spencer Rattler is going to get higher profile games playing at Oklahoma, which therefore kind of lends him a little bit better to Heisman talk. But Ridder didn't look, or Rattler didn't look good against Tulane. That's for damn sure. He threw 2 interceptions, a couple bad throws that could have been picked. 5-point win when they were 31-point favorites. I don't necessarily think it ended his Heisman run, but it certainly put him behind the 8 ball a little bit for the rest of the season. Luckily, he gets games against teams like, Texas and Iowa State to really boost that back up. But I got Ridder number 2. I also like Breece Hall. I just don't know. Like, for running backs to get Heisman love, they need like historical seasons.
That's true.
That's the only downside of it. Like, he could rush for 1,500 yards and 20 touchdowns, and he'll get like 2 Heisman votes. So it's that difficult for running backs to get Heisman looks. Yeah. But if anybody's going to find themselves in that conversation at the end of the year, it's going to be Breece Hall. And then right now, my dark horse after 2 weeks, Dorian Thompson Robinson from UCLA. Chip Kelly has got that kid playing great football. Yeah. I think he's only going to continue to get better. And then when he gets to line up against he gets to line up against Arizona State, he gets to line up against Utah, he gets to line up against USC and Oregon in these major, Pac-12 games, and he balls out in those. You're going to find him. You're going to find him in that end conversation. So Dorian Thompson-Robinson's my dark horse, but right now it's Bryce Young. He's number 1.
Yeah, and you make a good point about the running backs making a case. Like, Jonathan Taylor had one of the most prolific careers as a running back, and his best season, he wasn't even invited to be the ceremony.
There was one season Monty Ball had like 28 rushing touchdowns.
He had like 2,500 rushing yards.
Melvin Gordon has like more rushing touchdowns in the history of college football than anybody, and he never even got it. Like, it's just how running backs go. And like, if you're gonna be a running back who wins a Heisman, you got to be a Reggie Bush type guy. You got to be able to do it everywhere. To
me, Heisman kind of reminds the MVP. It's just how much value you also bring to your team. So if you're obviously the star of the team and winning is dependent solely on you, you're going to get the most attention and the most votes.
Yeah.
To talk about Bryce Young, he was sensational. He didn't miss a beat. It looked like he's been the starter for years. 4 TDs and 344 yards against a Miami that's very predominantly good at the defensive side. I always like the turnover chain, but that didn't show up very often that day.
It's really a testament. It's just Nick Saban runs a machine. It's plug and play. It doesn't matter who my quarterback is. It doesn't matter who the receivers are. It doesn't matter who the running back is. They just go out there, and they're the best team on the field.
Yeah.
It's like it's a level of expectation there that you don't see anywhere else. The level of expectation at Alabama is that we will step out on the field from minute 1 of the season, quarter 1, game 1, and we're the best team on the field. And anything less is unacceptable.
Yeah.
So
Pretty much. It's the standard. It's the Alabama standard, and he delivers every time. That's why he's the highest paid college coach.
man's gonna have 10 championships by the time it's all said and done.
That's crazy.
It's
dude.
crazy.
I mentioned I had Zach Charbonnet from UCLA.
Yeah.
I watched. So weird. Like I never watched UCLA games until this season. I watched both games, and he torched both teams.
Yeah, he looked really good against LSU.
And the one against Hawaii, sure, it's Hawaii. They're not the best power school. But 3 TDs, and he averaged 17 yards per carry.
That game was in Hawaii, though, wasn't it?
It was.
So you go to Hawaii, which even from California is a 5-hour time difference or 4-hour time difference or whatever. Like, I know that like they're both West Coast level like type teams, but like still going to Hawaii is not the easiest thing, even if you're a California team. So like that's a tough place to play.
And even for them, it's just tough because like they constantly have to go over the ocean to play. They go as far as like New Mexico, and Hawaii actually played UCLA at UCLA.
It was at UCLA.
So that makes a little bit more sense. But like even though just for any team that is part of this Hawaiian schedule, it's just ridiculous. But like back to him though, like he played against LSU. Sure, he only got 1 TD, but he still averaged 10.7 yards.
Yeah,
that's hard to do against a ranked team.
I think it's important to also note, and this has to do with kind of where UCLA is heading as a program in general. The fact that we've now mentioned 2 different UCLA players as potential Heisman candidates, both Charbonnet and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and Chip Kelly has a track record of putting players in Heisman conversations. Marcus Mariota won one.
That's right.
LaMichael James, the running back. LaMichael James was like second or third one year in the Heisman conversation. Like Chip Kelly can do this with both positions, and UCLA seems to be on that trajectory again with Chip Kelly as their head coach.
Yeah, and it was very strange. It's like right after Josh Rosen left, Chip Kelly became the head coach. They started slow, but now they're reemerging again.
Yeah, building a program is always difficult, and especially for a team like UCLA where you are heavy in a recruiting battle against USC right across the street, basically. And then Oregon recruits LA almost as good as USC does because it's all the kids who want to be Nike athletes because Oregon is just dripped in Nike. So like you're recruiting against 2 major college programs when you're one, the lesser of the 3 to begin with, and now have to try and overcome that in a recruiting battle. And against Stanford. I mean, you got to recruit against Stanford too, so it's tough. But Chip Kelly's doing a great job. It did take a couple, a season or 2, but this year, I mean, they look like every bit of a Pac-12 contender.
I do want to touch on. Oh, you know what? So I wanted to mention Spencer Rattler. You brought him up. To me, Spencer Rattler, it's really hard because when you compare Spencer Rattler, you always compare him to the predecessors, being Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts for 1 year. And when I see him in that kind of in this group of players, he doesn't come off to me as the best one of all those guys.
Oh no, he's definitely not. That's Kyler for sure.
And I think he has the best arm, but he's just not a complete project, and I'm not sure when it's going to happen.
He's the biggest, so he's well above 6 feet.
Oh, that's true.
He's
They're
like,
all
he's like 6'2", but Baker, Kyler, and Jalen are all 6 foot standing on high heels. Like they're not big guys. This is by far the biggest. I think I would say the biggest, or at least from a height standpoint, quarterback that Lincoln Riley's had. It's also probably, I mean, which goes to say I think why people are so high on him is like Lincoln Riley literally made Baker Mayfield into a number 1 overall pick. Lincoln Riley literally made Kyler Murray into the number 1 overall pick. Lincoln Riley took a guy like Jalen Hurts, who most people at the beginning of the season probably had like a fringe 3rd-day pick, and he made him a top 50 pick.
And a Heisman candidate. I think people are like infatuated with the fact that Rattler is this kind of prototypical NFL quarterback build in a way that Baker, Jalen, and Kyler were not. And they're like, holy cow, what is he going to be able to do with this guy? But at the end of the day, I'm not quite sure Rattler is the same player as those guys. I think all 3 of those guys had more natural football instincts,
especially Baker Mayfield. I mean, that Baker Mayfield's like Jesus would turn water into wine at times. Like, it was pretty crazy. It was fun to watch. Baker was like Johnny Manziel in so many ways, at least from like when they were in college, not necessarily in the pros, but like the ability to create something out of nothing. I don't necessarily see that in Rattler the way that, you did in previous guys.
Yeah.
Because like Oklahoma's offense is always going to be open. It's going to be 5 wide. There's always going to be somebody wide open. So if you can make those throws, that's fine. But like when that throw's not, there, or you miss that first read, or you miss, pocket collapses quickly on a blitz, like what can you do for me? I don't know if Rattler's doing for me the way that those other 3 guys did.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't react well to pressure, essentially, which is what caused him to throw the interceptions, and he's not as good as extending.
He gets happy feet.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fine. He still can throw some big numbers, and he has that arm talent I mentioned. It's just a matter of he can just be more situationally aware of what's going on. And like, if I were to like kind of rank the best one of the Oklahoma quarterbacks, I'm going to give it to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, to me, he was just a Swiss Army knife. You taking a video of me?
No, dude, I was just taking a picture.
Kyler Murray was a Swiss Army knife. He had the arm talent, and he had the wheels. Like, he wasn't like Lamar Jackson with his legs, but he had the acceleration. He can get from point A to point B in a blink of an eye. And then I want to talk about Jack Coan because that was my honorable mention. He was sensational with Notre Dame, and it's just maybe I'm just overreacting because my Wisco bias. He used to be the starting quarterback until they passed over to Graham Mertz, and people ask why did they move from Jack Coan to Graham Mertz? The thing about Jack Coan is he was the safest choice.
Yeah,
he minimized turnovers. And he kept the ball safe. But Graham Mertz was the one that was going to change the quarterback mold. Since Russell Wilson left, Wisco quarterbacks have been in a system where they're not designed to thrive. It's all at the run game first. Just ask Melvin Gordon, Monte Ball, Jonathan Taylor. So Jack Coan obviously just didn't fit in that system. And Graham Mertz was going to be that guy to propel the passing offense. But honestly, I think Wisco doesn't know how to coach quarterbacks.
No, they don't.
Jack Coan knew that. That's why he went to the transfer portal.
Yeah, Jack Coan is a talented quarterback who just needed a different system.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all it is.
Right.
And, I mean, he was making NFL throws.
Oh, yeah.
On Friday night, or on Sunday night. Sunday night, he was making NFL-level throws, dropping dimes into tight coverage. It was pretty impressive. I was impressed.
I was, too.
I was impressed with that. If he's going to play like that all season, Notre Dame's not going to be easy. Notre Dame's not going to be an easy victory for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, if he's playing like that, it's pretty clear to me that he is the proper successor to Ian Book. Because Ian Book was a good quarterback, but he never was a great one.
Well, Ian Book was the reason why they were good again. He wasn't the reason. I mean, his limitations were the reason why they were never going to be a national championship contender. But I mean, Ian Book certainly got you in the conversation.
Right. So let's transition over to our predictions for each Power 5 championship. Let's see. We'll kind of do the same thing with the Heismans. I will list my 5 matchups. You list your 5 matchups, and we'll discuss each conference. So we're going to go Big 12 to Big 10, Pac-12, ACC, and then the SEC. So starting at the top, Big 12, I got Oklahoma versus Iowa State. Big 10, I got Ohio State versus Iowa. Pac-12, Oregon versus UCLA. ACC, Clemson versus Miami, and then SEC, Alabama versus Georgia.
So we agree on SEC and ACC. We both have Clemson, Miami, and Bama, Georgia. I'm going Oklahoma, Texas. I think Texas is finally going to happen.
I forgot about that.
Happen. I think with Sarkisian there, I do recognize the turnover at the quarterback position. Obviously, Sam Ellinger is in the NFL now. But I think this is finally Texas' season with a new coach in place that can put points on the board. I think Texas, like a 1 or 2 loss Texas, is in the mold, and I think you see a Big 12 championship of Oklahoma, Texas. I have Ohio State in the Big 10 championship, but I'm not counting Wisconsin out.
Okay, that's fair.
I think what happens is if we see – it's going to come down to the Iowa-Wisconsin matchup in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, the 24th or the 25th.
I think it's the 30th.
Yeah, whatever that matchup is, I think ultimately decides the West. So now that Northwestern was awful, Northwestern looks so bad against Michigan State, I think that if we're going to take account of the teams who we generally assume to be there in the West every time, and that's Iowa, Northwestern, and Wisconsin, even though they lost to Penn State, it was a tight game, first game of the season. I don't see Wisconsin faltering again in the Big Ten.
Okay.
I think they come out. I think they end up beating Iowa in that game, and I think that Wisconsin takes the West, plays Ohio State, and then, we also have Oregon, UCLA together. So we both have Oregon, UCLA. So the only ones we differ on are one team in the Big Ten and one team in the Big 12.
Yeah. To touch upon, with Texas, I completely forgot. I'll be honest, I looked over Texas. Their new head coach, he's a refreshing start. And it sounds like it's going to be more on the running side. You got Bijan Robinson, who I mentioned was one of my Heisman picks. Mm-hmm. He's great. He's an absolute unit. So I'm curious to what the Big 12 is going to do about that monster from Texas. But I don't want to count ISU out because I mentioned the stability is there, and there's always a chance for them.
I agree. And I actually went back and forth between Texas and Iowa State on who I thought was going to be the team to go. And I feel like Texas has just been knocking on the door to return for so long now. And something about me says that Sarkisian and this new head coach, as you called it, refreshing. I think that's what gets them over that hump that they've been sitting at for the last 2-3 years.
Yeah. The one thing that kind of puts me more towards Iowa State than Texas is the matchup. Texas is going to Iowa State, and they don't. Iowa State has.
The experience factor for Iowa State is huge, especially in a home matchup or home game against Texas.
Yeah.
I obviously, like I said, between Wisconsin and Iowa, probably comes down to that matchup. That matchup's likely what gets.
It's in Madison too.
Yeah. So I think is where I'm going to flip the coin on Texas, just because I do think the Big 12, as they're about to dismantle in the coming years as well, Narrative Street says that one last Oklahoma-Texas matchup is coming. We'll see. We'll see if it happens this year.
All right. Either one, if it's Oklahoma or Iowa State. If it's Iowa State or Texas, I'll be happy with either matchup.
That'd be great.
In terms of Big Ten, I hate to be the one. I'm a big Wisco fan, and I doubted them. It's just I need to see more from the passing game. I need to see some progression from Graham Mertz, and it was very strange to me. They didn't start Jalen Berger, who was one of their best running backs last season. He didn't play a snap, and that's
weird.
I don't have any conclusion of what caused that. So unless maybe he got in trouble, or maybe he has COVID, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he needs to be in the lineup to see what more Wisco can do in the running game as well.
That's fair. I think my pick for Wisco is less about Wisco as much as it is me just not being a believer in Iowa. I find myself rarely saying this, but I kind of side with Colin Cowherd. They're fools. They're fool's gold. I don't care what I saw against Indiana. I just don't necessarily think that that's the real Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think Iowa's frauds, and I think that Wisconsin just finds themselves in the position to go to another Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, you're right. It probably will come down to the matchup on October 30th at Wisconsin, because Iowa's schedule itself doesn't really seem that difficult to me, and it will come down to this matchup to determine who's really the best in the Big Ten West.
The problem with Iowa is they're going to have a game against freaking Nebraska.
Yeah, that's the last.
And they're
going
to struggle. They inevitably don't show up for games they should house people in, but then they beat teams by impressive showings. It's very weird. Iowa's just very weird to me, and it's going to end up being do they have to go to Evanston to play Northwestern?
Let's see, they do.
So they go to Evanston?
Yeah.
Which means it's an 11 a.m. game?
It doesn't say yet.
TBD. Guarantee that'll be 11 a.m. game since Northwestern's not going to be ranked. That's what they'll lose. You can mark it right here. Iowa will go to Northwestern, and they will lose in Evanston.
Iowa will go to Northwestern and lose. All right. And this was said by Brian L. All right, I have it on my notes.
There you go.
I'll make sure I'll tweet you when that game happens, and I'll even use this clip of you saying that. And then when they lose, I would say Brian was right. Check out the footage. Here's proof. I'm either one of these matchups. We all said we all agree. Oregon, UCLA, Clemson, Miami, Alabama, Georgia. Either one of these matchups. It's college football, man. It's back to be fully in gear with college football. It's not the fans. It's not just the fans. It's the full schedule. We see some matchups outside the conference again.
It's fun to be able to make these predictions again.
Yeah, it is.
That's the cool part for me. And like, listen, Bama Georgia is pretty much every year for the SEC championship game, but I cannot wait till it's Bama Georgia again because it's going to be a damn good football game.
Alabama's O-line against Georgia's D-line. Ooh, it's going to be a rough. And it's going to be a good one, I say.
Even though Clemson struggled against Georgia and they lost, like I don't think there's anyone better than Clemson in the ACC. Like I still think they're going to be there. And even though Miami got trounced by Bama, you go look at Miami's schedule. The toughest place they have to go play the rest of the season is at North Carolina. It's like they get to host Virginia Tech. They get to host NC State. Like their tough games are at home, and they got to go to North Carolina. I think you could see a situation where Miami is like 10-2 when the season comes, like to the end. So I really just. We talked about it a little bit when we were going over the Georgia Clemson game. Is like you can't always take stock in week one. And I think it goes to show, like you and I both have one-loss teams who lost their first matchup or first game of the season in the ACC championship. Like it's still our prediction, and we're recording this after that game's been played, knowing that like what we know now.
That's true.
So like, yes, Oregon may have lost their best player, but like, who's going to be better than them in the Pac-12 North? Like, Stanford's not good this year. Like Stanford went and got destroyed by Kansas State like this past week. Oregon State, not good. Washington just lost to Montana. Like Oregon is by far the best team despite losing their best player in the North, while all the good teams you got, UCLA, but then USC, Arizona State, Utah, a lot of ranked teams in the South, and UCLA is literally looking like a rebirth of what they used to be like from the Troy Aikman days. Like
wow.
It's a fun time to look at some of these predictions, and I think that, we've named 10 teams here. Almost every single one of our Heisman candidates play for one of these 10 teams for the most part. Like, it's going to be exciting.
It is. Looks like we'll just kind of roll through and go to NFL. Oh, by the way, my camera's dead. I'm for now on, I'm going to stop. Like, I'm tired of like, oh, my camera's dead. I got to turn it off and turn it back on. I'm just going to keep rolling because as long as I have audio, I'm just gonna roll right through, man. This shit takes way.
It is a podcast, you know what I'm saying?
That's true.
We're just talking, shooting the shit. That's what the people want.
I'll add some good visuals on the YouTube video. You're right. It is a podcast at the end of the day, so it's audio first and then video.
Yeah.
So let's transition to NFL. I do have to tell. I got about 30 more minutes because I got to go home and get dinner ready.
Oh, you're good.
Okay, so we'll just roll through.
Just roll through the NFL,
Yeah. So for the NFL, me and Brian will talk about 3 matchups going into Week 1. We'll talk about Brian's Bears. They'll be playing the Rams. We'll talk about my Packers, and they're playing the Saints. And we'll mix it up and do the Dolphins versus Patriots matchup. And then we'll talk about some trending headlines going on in the NFL outside the matchups. So starting with Brian on Bears versus Rams. What are your predictions?
I cannot believe that they gave this a Sunday night matchup. I honestly cannot fathom as a Bears fan the fact that I'm about to watch Andy freaking Dalton on Sunday Night Football in week 1 of the season. Like, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be bad. I'm not looking forward to this matchup, AJ. Not going to lie. As much as I want to be, hopelessly optimistic about my Bears on a season-long standpoint, week 1, zero optimism whatsoever.
Do you think they made this matchup in expectation of Justin Fields starting?
Not necessarily. Main reason for it, I think, is more about Matthew Stafford. I think Stafford being on the Rams now and playing against a Bears team that he's played twice a year for the last, 15 or 13 years of his career, probably plays more into it than the anticipation that hopefully Justin Fields is the week 1 starter. You also got to take into effect that the Rams are likely going to be the favorite out of the NFC to go to the Super Bowl, aside from a handful of other teams like the Bucs and the Packers, most notably. But I think this is more about how good the Rams are going to be and how much people want to watch the Rams in prime time than it is about the Bears maybe starting Justin Fields after the draft. While it would be much more fun to watch Justin Fields against Matthew Stafford, I think it's more, being able to see Aaron Donald with 3 sacks. It's going to be more about Matthew Stafford throwing for 400 yards on Sunday night and things like that than it is about, the Bears.
I'm going to tell you this. Every time I hear the name Matthew Stafford, I get so hyped now because we can finally see Matt Stafford be unleashed and on a winning team that's going to be unbelievably great.
I love the fact that Matthew Stafford's always had weapons. I mean, the man had Calvin Johnson for the majority of his career. It's not like he's never had anyone to throw to, but he's never had an offensive system that let him do what, and pardon my language for your less than, let him do whatever the hell F he wanted to do. He now has a head coach in Sean McVay who is going to create plays and schemes on offense that is going to make Matthew Stafford look like the Hall of Famer that we all know he probably is, but it's going to be like prime Ben Roethlisberger mixed with just every bit of Phillip Rivers you ever wanted, just throwing the ball everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think Matthew Stafford I'll say this right now, I think Matthew Stafford's a dark horse MVP candidate this year.
He's a light horse, if you ask me.
That's fair. The Vegas odds say slightly different, but I think in terms of if you're looking for someone to put on MVP that's not named Rodgers or Mahomes, I think that Matthew Stafford might be, the guy to go for.
Yeah, and me and Oscar talked about this in the last episode. The NFL likes stories.
Oh, they love stories.
This is a story that's an MVP story.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm excited to see Matt Stafford play. In terms of the overall matchup, I got a feeling it's going to be a beatdown. It's going to be 3 touchdown difference, honestly. If you're a gambling person, you're betting Rams minus 7.5, and you're probably not thinking twice about it. If I was one of those people who bet against my own team, I would be doing that, but I don't, so therefore I will not have a bet on this game. However, if you just look at the pure matchups, and from defensive line to offensive line is the biggest mismatch you could possibly have. And then you look at the Rams wide receivers against the Bears secondary, and it's the second biggest mismatch you could possibly have. There is no position battle or matchup on the field where the Bears have the advantage. Who is Jalen Ramsey going to match up with?
Allen Robinson.
Allen Robinson?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know because
when they played last year, he found himself on Darnell Mooney a couple times.
That's what I was going to go on because Darnell Mooney is kind of, I said in a previous episode, he's kind of one of the breakout players to watch out for.
Agreed.
I think he has some tap potential, and it just didn't help that Mitch Trubisky wasn't the guy for him. And I think we'll see more of that. Not this game, but I think in future games when Justin Fields eventually takes the field or Andy Dalton gets more accustomed to the offense, Darnell Mooney will definitely shine a little bit more.
I completely agree. I really like Darnell Mooney. One of the few picks Ryan Pace has made in his career as Bears GM where I've been like, good on you, man. Great job. But again, I mean, if you think back on the Bears-Rams game last year, very famously, and it made, was Twitter fodder for a while, wherein Darnell Mooney deked Jalen Ramsey out of his shorts on a double move. Jalen Ramsey was running literally the opposite direction. Darnell Mooney just cut up field, and Mitch Trubisky overthrew him by 7 yards.
So if Jalen Ramsey was on Darnell, who was on Allen Robinson that game?
So the thing that they did, and it was Johnson. What's his name? Ty Johnson. Literally was slipping my mind for a second. Their second quarter, who's also crazy good. The thing is I don't think Jalen Ramsey's a guy who shadows your number ones. He's the guy who's going to cover DeAndre Hopkins all game. He's the guy who's going to cover Devontae Adams all game. And this is no knock on Allen Robinson. I just don't think the Bears offense uses Allen Robinson in a way that causes a guy like Jalen Ramsey to shadow him across the entire field. So it's not a knock on Robinson and his talent. It's more a knock on the Bears' utilization of Allen Robinson, because a guy like Jalen Ramsey, there's really no point in him taking away Allen Robinson and like 9-yard catches all game, because that's how the Bears use Allen Robinson. They throw quick. It's like he's a possession receiver. That's why he has 110 catches every year. But like the yardage isn't 1,400, 1,500 yards. It's like 1,200 yards. And you could use Jalen Ramsey in better ways than to take away 12-yard in routes all game, or 12-yard out routes and back shoulder fades and things like that. So while I do think Mooney is a little bit more dynamic, and that's why you see Ramsey covering Mooney, I think Jalen Ramsey's you're going to see time on both of them.
Okay.
So
yeah. I don't think Fields will take the field
nope, unless Dalton gets hurt. So
unless he does.
Dalton gets hurt.
Maybe. I think you'll see an appearance in week 2 against the Bengals.
You think so? I'm not so high. I think it's going to be closer to week 5.
Okay.
But I think Nagy has committed himself to Dalton. But if it's disaster after like 4 games and they're like 1-3 or 0-4, I don't think they'll be 0-4. I think they'll beat Cincinnati regardless. But if you find them at like 1-3 by the time they got to play the Raiders, if you find them at 1-4 by the time they got to play the Packers, yeah,
it's gonna be real messy.
It's gonna be messy, and they're lucky they only have 1 home game in the first 5 weeks, because if they're 1-3 and are playing home games, it's going to be the most boos you ever hear at Soldier Field. It would be so bad. I don't think Fields is coming until week 4 or 5 at the earliest.
And those are home games, correct?
So actually, they're road games. So the Bears go obviously to LA on Sunday. Then they're at home against Cincinnati in week 2. So that's their first home game. Mm-hmm. Then they go to Cleveland. They go to to Las Vegas.
Let's see. Okay, I got Rams, Cincinnati. Cincinnati's at Bears.
Yes.
Cleveland. Browns at Cleveland, at home against the Lions, and then at Las Vegas, and then back
week
at
4.
home.
Then back at home versus the Packers, right?
Yeah.
That's week 5.
Yeah, and then week 6 is at Tampa Bay.
Yeah. So if they go 1-3 in their first 4 games, even though 3 of those are road games, I think the change you see comes during the Packers game. Because if they are 1-3 and they're losing at home to their division rival, who you literally cannot afford to lose to anymore, and you're down like a touchdown or 10 points at halftime, it's going to be very difficult to justify continuing to play Andy Dalton. I think at a certain point you just got to say, Justin Fields is our quarterback of the future. Let's see what's going on here.
So let's say that they're at home against the Packers. Packers are whooping them fourth quarter, down by 3 touchdowns.
Put them in.
Do you see a situation where Jordan Love and Justin Fields
are
in the field?
100%.
That'd be cool.
Without a doubt, you could. But I do think if the game against the Packers gets anywhere close to out of hand, the change has to come at that point. Okay. It's just like there's no justification for continuing to have Andy Dalton anymore.
I mean, I do see a situation where he either plays week 2 or he plays against the Packers at home.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of the Packers, let's carry on to the Packers versus Saints. I believe this one is at Saints.
So technically it's at the Saints,
okay,
the home team, but it's being played in Jacksonville.
That's right.
Because of the hurricane.
Yeah. To me, I don't see this Saints team being – I don't know. It's hard to say. I want to say for now it's not as consistent as last year's Saints.
Well, you don't have Drew Brees anymore.
You don't have Drew Brees.
Michael Thomas.
Did you request a trade?
He's hurt.
He's hurt. Okay. I don't think this offense is going to be any better than last year with the uncertainty of Jameis Winston. Because Jameis Winston, he can ball, but I'm not sold on the consistency of Jameis Winston.
Jameis Winston's really good at playing from behind because he just throws the ball 50 times.
Yeah.
Jameis Winston doesn't really play with a lead very well. So, yeah, he's very inconsistent.
Yeah, and someone made the joke to me that, like, the difference between Mitch and Jameis Winston is Mitch doesn't see anyone open. Jameis Winston sees everybody open.
Yep. Jameis Winston's very much like Jay Cutler. Everybody is open in that man's eyes.
But I'm rooting for Jameis Winston. I think he's really talented.
Yeah, I think it'd be a fun comeback.
Yeah, but I think the Packers will probably win by at least 10 points.
Yeah, the line right now in Vegas is -4, which is usually a pretty good indicator that the favorite, which is the Packers in the situation, is going to win by at least a touchdown. That's usually a telltale sign when you see something like that. general consensus is take the favorite, which is the Packers. I think the Packers win by at least a touchdown.
Yeah, and I can see a situation where they use their first round pick, Eric Stokes, who's potentially going to be I can't remember his I forgot his name. I'll figure out later, but he'll be kind of have some spotlight, get some reps in, and I would say he might even get a deflected pass or even an interception if it's against James Winston. And then, of course, you're going to have J.R. Alexander, who's going to just ball out as usual.
Per usual.
I say Rodgers will at least have 2 touchdowns. I'll say 3. Rodgers will have 3 touchdowns.
I would say 3. I think, Aaron Rodgers is coming for blood this season. That man.
Kevin King. That's what I want to say.
Kevin King.
Yeah, Eric Stokes is the eventual replacement of Kevin King, and he'll have some reps, and he'll definitely shine. But yeah, Rodgers is not going to miss a step. This is just a typical day for him.
Yeah, I know I said, Stafford's a fun little dark horse MVP candidate, but for me, I could see him going back to back. I could see him winning MVP easily this year.
I don't know. I just don't see a situation where you go back to back like Giannis did with the NBA.
I mean, it happens. It's happened in the NFL. Peyton Manning did it.
Well, how long ago was that, though?
I mean, a while. Don't get me wrong. It's not like it happens, very commonly. But like, I think the general thought process is, and like we said, the NFL loves stories. I mean, given everything that happened in the offseason surrounding Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, I'm telling you, the numbers that those two are going to put up this year are going to be insanity.
Yeah, I agree. The only situation I see Aaron Rodgers winning the MVP again is if he puts up 50 TDs to 5 interceptions, 4,500 yards. That's the only situation I see him winning the MVP again. Because that would be the most efficient passer rating in the history of the league.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's that talented. I mean, we're watching a fine wine. Rodgers and Brady are just beautiful things to watch at this age, the fact that they're doing it so well. The Packers, for me, are the favorite in the NFC, even more so than the defending champion Bucks. Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty light work for the Packers week 1 against the Saints.
Yeah, I think it'll be an easy. I'm not going to say it's not going to be an easy win, but
no game's ever easy.
Right. There's always uncertainty when it comes to any game, regards to the matchup. An example would be when the Dolphins lost to the Patriots. When the Patriots lost to the Dolphins in a last play, that was pretty much just like a lateral.
Oh yeah.
And that's where we want to talk next. The Dolphins will play the Patriots on week 1. You got Tua Tagovailoa against Mac Jones and the Patriots, 2 former teammates.
So the last 2 starting quarterbacks for Alabama. I like the Dolphins a lot this year. I do like their defense a lot, but I don't know. When Bill Belichick makes decisions that we sometimes are like, what's he thinking right now? They usually pan out. I wasn't a big Mac Jones fan coming into the NFL, but the Patriots drafted him in the first round, something they've never done before, which is draft a quarterback in the first round. They let Cam Newton walk, not to say Cam Newton's, good anymore, but they let Cam Newton walk, who's a former MVP, because they think they got their guy in Mac Jones. Damian Harris, I think, is a stud running back. Their offensive line is good. I think this is close, just because I think this is a low-scoring game. I don't necessarily see fireworks by either offense here, but I don't know. I think this is a Patriots win at home versus the Dolphins. I do think the Dolphins have a lot of upside, a lot of things to be excited about. I just don't know. I don't know. I'm not a believer in Tua. I'm not there yet.
Yeah, one thing I noticed with Nick Saban's quarterbacks goes all the way to the A.J. McCarrons and moving forward is that they have a similar trait, in my opinion. Tua and Mac Jones are both systematic quarterbacks. And that's not a bad thing because you need consistency and you need to keep the ball safe.
Yeah.
But if I were to give who would keep the ball the safest, I'm going to Mac Jones. I've seen him make some really good decision-making He's shown some good decision-making skills, and Tua just has a little uncertainty. He's a little more comfortable now, especially with his teammate Jalen Waddle with him.
Yeah.
But I see Mac Jones excelling in this very prestigious scheme that Bill Belichick has designed for quarterbacks like Tom Brady. And I don't see why Mac Jones can't excel in that system.
Yeah, I like that you just said, the scheme that Belichick has designed and stuff like that, because I do fundamentally believe that when it comes to division matchups in the AFC East, the tipper of the scales is always coaching, and that's why Bill Belichick and the Patriots generally rise to the top. Now, I know the Bills are the best team in the AFC East and have been probably for the last 2 years now, but I don't, the Dolphins for me strike me as a team who's going to come out this season and think they're a little bit better than they are, which is nothing wrong with confidence and stuff like that. But I don't know if Tua is the type of guy that you just let unleash the ball 30, 35 times a game. And I don't know if Brian Flores, the coach of the Dolphins, realizes that yet. Well, Bill Belichick knows that the way I win with Mac Jones is he throws it 20 to 25 times, limits opportunities for turnovers and mistakes. We run the ball, get touchdowns, end up winning this game like 17-13. Like that's just Bill Belichick knows that to win this game, that's what's going to happen. While in the Dolphins have a lot of shiny toys. Tua, Myles Gaskin spent a lot on their offensive line. They got wide receivers like Jalen Waddle, but they've also got the likes of Devontae Parker still there. Like they've got guys who can score, guys who can make plays, Mike Gesicki in the red zone. But like, are we going to trust Tua to be the guy to not make mistakes when it matters in an offense that's going to give him the opportunity to throw as much as he's going to? And for me, I think the difference is Belichick knows to win his game, it has to be that 17-13 grinded out touchdowns and then defense, like rushing touchdowns and then defense. Well, I'm not quite sure the Dolphins and Flores have that recipe for success yet, just because they're new to this. And I think coaching's the difference, and the Patriots win a home division battle against the Dolphins.
Yeah, and I think the Patriots also have a good red zone target, Jonnu Smith.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so they're definitely going to look real good when it comes to these tight situations where they're in the red zone. They got to capitalize on the moment.
And they don't have a number one receiver. Don't get me wrong, Jacoby Myers isn't a number one by any means, but like Bill Belichick has shown time and time again that he can take wide receivers who aren't necessarily that good and turn them into serviceable to above average wide receivers. Julian Edelman's a great example. Wes Welker's a great example. Like Bill Belichick can do this, and I think Jacoby Myers has enough talent. And then you bring in a guy like Nelson Aguilar as well, who like very inconsistent, but was a first round pick back in the day, can flash signs of making a big play. In a game like this, one big play could be the difference. Sure. I'm going to go ahead and side with the Patriots being the ones that make that play.
Me too. I did mention we had two topics, but we're a little short on time, so let's just do one. And the one that interests me the most is this breaking news. Houston Texans have just announced that Tyrod Taylor will be the starting quarterback for Week 1. What are your thoughts on that, and what does this mean for Deshaun Watson?
I mean, not good. I don't really know if there's any other way to say it. Like Deshaun Watson's in a pretty, he's gotten himself into a pretty bad predicament. I'm not going to necessarily speak on it because one of my big things is, especially in legal proceedings like this, when it comes to things like domestic violence or sexual assault, don't speak on things you don't know. But from the looks of it and all of the information that is out there, it does not look good for Deshaun Watson. I think the Texans are making the right move by not starting him. If we're being completely serious, I feel like the Texans should probably have had him at home the last couple weeks during training camp and practices and preseason and stuff like that. He's been around the team and at the team facilities. I don't think that should have been the case as they try to figure that situation out in the courts. But you know what? Tyrod Taylor started NFL football games. Tyrod Taylor's been around for a lot of years. Tyrod Taylor can get the job done. But with that being said, I know it's against the Jaguars, but yeah, I think I'll be taking the Jaguars if I were to be picking a winner in that game.
I'm gonna go with you too. I think the Jaguars would win that game. If you're a fantasy owner and your lineup is facing the Houston Texans, it might be a good idea to put them in.
Yeah, that offense is going to struggle a lot. And
the defense.
Listen, the offense wasn't good when Deshaun Watson was a quarterback. They're not going to be anywhere close to as good with Tyrod Taylor as the quarterback.
You're missing J.J. Watt this season too.
No J.J. Watt.
He's not going to be in Arizona.
Yeah, he's in Arizona. I mean, like, they don't have good receivers. Their running backs are a combination of David Johnson and Phillip Lindsay. Like, there's just not a lot of things about the Texans that inspire anything that's, I don't know if that's a 3-win football team. That they might struggle to win. The fact that they might win football games is only because they play in the AFC South, and you get to play Jacksonville twice. And yeah, I would not be excited if I were a Texans fan.
If I were the Houston Texans, first off, I hope Tyrod does well. He's a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback, but he's a good quarterback. He's an NFL quarterback for a reason. I think the Houston Texans should be considering their future moves in terms of maybe looking at the draft.
Yeah, I'd be trying to acquire some draft assets.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for Deshaun Watson. I think he's a very talented player, but
he's an extremely talented player.
But it's just not looking good for him. And hopefully, I don't know. I mean, hopefully some good comes out of this situation for everyone.
Let's hope so.
But Texans fans, I forgot the cameras off. Texans fans, don't get your hopes up this season.
Yeah, it ain't going to be pretty.
Just watch college football and figure out who your team's going to draft.
It ain't going to be pretty. That's for sure.
Looks like we're good to go, Brian. Thanks for coming back.
I really appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on, AJ. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope my predictions are a little bit better this time than they were on Texas basketball back in March.
I hope so, too. Well, that's it, guys. Thanks to everyone that's been listening or watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. Every little bit helps. I will see you guys in the next episode. Take care.
Later.